Good morning, everybody. Hello, hello. I hope you're having a wonderful March 4th. Gonna wait half a second here for everybody to file in. Take your seats, take your seats. Don't step on anybody's shoes as you file into the aisles. Uh, Welcome into our webinar, Inclusive Hiring and Mental Health in the Workplace. My name is Evan Balaki. I'm from 501c Services. For those that don't know, we and our partners have been providing unemployment management to nonprofit organizations for the last 40 years, if you can believe it. We help you save those precious dollars that are so important to furthering your mission, and that's what brightens my day, is making sure that our nonprofit wheel in this country keeps moving to help all those lovely people. Today, we're joined by one of those partners in Benjamin Freedman. He's a president and CEO of Weiser Innovations, and Dr. Claire, an equity strategist. They're going to have a wonderful conversation, and I hope that you guys hit the Q&A box with any and all of your questions. Chat and video are disabled for the audience, as well as audio. So the only way we'll be able to interact with you if you guys find that Q&A box. This webinar is going to be recorded and is currently recording, and it will be available via email after the session. And for all the content within this webinar, unless presented by an attorney, nothing in these webinars is to be considered legal advice. Content for this webinar has been pulled from multiple sources and or our experience and years of expertise. Should you get disconnected, you should be able to rejoin the webinar the same way you entered with that link. If that does not work, unfortunately, that will be on your end, and we cannot provide technical support to everyone in this webinar. There's just way too many of you lovely people. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Benjamin and Dr. Claire. Welcome in.
Thanks so much, Evan. So as Evan said, I'm Benjamin Freedman. I am the president and CEO of Weiser Innovations. We do talent acquisition for mission-driven organizations. We focus on both strategy as well as direct recruitment and implementation. Everything from making sure you have the right systems to hiring your teams. Um, this webinar today is particularly personal to me. It's one of the reasons I'm wearing what I'm wearing. Um, I am somebody who is very neurodiverse, been diagnosed with dyslexia, with autism, ADHD, Tourette's, as well as with physical health conditions that qualify as disabilities, as they are autoimmune disorders. And the population that I am part of is very often neglected or not thought about very much in the hiring process. And so I want to make sure that as we're looking at our teams, we're being as inclusive as we can be, and we're making sure that we're not making innocent mistakes and that we're setting every candidate up to be successful. Um, with that, I'd like to introduce you to my esteemed colleague and great friend, Dr. Claire Green-Forde, and I will let her introduce herself.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon. I am so honored to be here. And Ben, I'm really excited to share space with you. We have been looking forward to this for a while. This conversation is also personal to me because not only am I also a mental health executive, I am also someone who lives with intersecting identities, autoimmune disorders, and a host of other things. And so when we think about inclusive hiring and mental health and well-being, it's really important that we center our own well-being and support that of others. Additionally, I am the founder and CEO of Dr. Claire Speaks, which is a thought leadership and strategic advisory firm specializing in helping social impact and healthcare leaders create psychologically honoring workplace cultures while driving profitability and building positive cultures.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to get started. The way that we are going to be structuring this is very conversationally. It's basically inviting you to, a couch conversation between Claire and myself. These are things that we talk about. These are things that really intersect between our work And so we want to make sure this is interactive. If you have questions or comments, please use that Q&A. Um, those questions will remain anonymous. This way, if it's anything personal, it stays that way. And as evidenced by the way that we're starting this, personal is important here. Um, we don't necessarily know what somebody brings to the table and how they identify. And so we want to make sure that we're doing the things necessary so that everybody has access and that we're aware of things that we may or may not be doing that can really impact somebody with a different thought process or different way of understanding or different way of engaging. Um, and so with that, I want to get started, and something that we have all seen, especially um, through the COVID pandemic, mental health has been a paramount topic. I'll tell you, in recruiting, there are not enough mental health professionals to fill all the jobs. Um, so where I want to start the conversation is why is it so critical, in the nonprofit hiring process for both candidates, for executive leadership and hiring managers, and the board, to be aware and, you know, how does ambiguity just amplify the strain? Because if people aren't aware, how do you make sure you're taking care of them? And as nonprofit professionals, that's really what we do is we look to take care of people, So I'm curious what you think, Claire.
Yeah, I really love this question. And I do want to add a caveat to what Evan said. Nothing in this conversation should also constitute as medical or mental health advice, in
Yeah,
addition to not any legal advice. So this is a broad question, and I don't know if on the webinar feature there is an ability to do reactions, but I would, if there is or isn't, how many of you consider yourself to be executive leaders and to be, whether that's an executive director, you have been in leadership across any industry. How many of you have ever experienced that? And even if I can't see your responses, I'm going to dare to say that every single person is going to identify and say, I identify as a leader. I will then ask you to consider how many of you have ever felt incredibly stressed and overwhelmed in your role, navigating everything you have to juggle. And again, I'm going to take a gander that 99.9% of you are going to say yes. And this is part of why we're having this conversation, because when you think about why mental health is so critical, not only in the nonprofit sector and the process of hiring for candidates, for leaders, for boards, it's because nonprofit hiring is directly connected to mission stewardship and it's directly connected to the community impact that we all have and we want to have. We also know that research tells us 95% of nonprofit leaders have reported experiencing burnout or concerns about burnout. Which is why I said to you, I'm pretty sure 99.9% are you going to tell me that you've experienced feeling overwhelmed or stressed and that you identify as leaders. And so we're framing this conversation about the fact that all of you are experiencing these things and you know what the stress and the weight is. And when we are in the nonprofit sector, I can tell you the thing that has driven me up the wall for years is we have to do more with less. That math ain't mathing. That equation doesn't equate. And we keep saying it and we perpetuate it. We're in under-resourced environments. We're already stressed. Ben just mentioned there's not enough mental health practitioners to fill the roles that are currently available. And we know that the need is there. And so when I think about why mental health is really critical, it's because we are literally the lifeblood of our communities. You are the person that saves someone's life. You are the person, your organization, the work that you do. You have changed the trajectory of an individual's life, which means you have changed the trajectory of a family, which means you've changed the trajectory of a community, which means you have changed the trajectory of the world. You are world changers. That is a heavy weight and a heavy burden. Your mission aligned. Your heart is in this. But when our hearts are in this and our souls are in this and we care so much as leaders and as the people that come into our systems, the candidates, there's so much emotional investment connected to this Many of us get into this space because we care deeply, whether we have gone through our own challenges, whether we have had a friend or a loved one who navigated challenges, or have this sense of injustice and we want to do our part to make it a little calmer and kinder in this world. Our burden is to change the world that we're in while also living in this world. And so when we're carrying this weight socially, emotionally, financially, it impacts our mental health and well-being. And when you talk about the ambiguity, Ben, and I know you and I've talked about this a lot because I've reached out to you about processes I've gone through that were so confusing and ambiguous. I withdrew myself from the pool. I'm
Oh, that
awesome. You're not getting another Dr. Claire. You're just not. But I took myself out of something that I really cared about more than once because the hiring process was so convoluted. There was such a lack of clarity around what they wanted, even the role. The job description was 9 pages long. That I said, if this chaos is existing in my process, even Jenny introduced to this company, then that lets me know that the culture is not one that I can work within because it's unhealthy.
something that I'd like to add to that, and on a really basic level, whether you are identified as neurodiverse, a phrase that Dr. Claire likes to say, we all are, because no two brains are alike.
True.
But whether you're diagnosed like I am, whether you're going through a rough spot, whether it's anxiety, depression, whether you're healing through something, we all go through things in our life. If you have a hiring process that is very purposeful and you know what's going to happen, you know the cadence, you know who you're talking to, maybe you even know the questions before you go in. All of these little things, they don't just help people with variances from what is quote unquote normal, they help everybody.
Hmm.
Everybody in the hiring process is anxious, period. Every candidate is anxious. Every person doing the interviewing is stressed,
Hmm.
you know. And when you think about that, and you don't have to worry about what things look like, what are timelines, when is somebody getting back to me? Can I actually get a hold of a human so that when I have a question, it can be facilitated? You know, this is something that it benefits everybody. And so the motivation for doing it may be so that we are inclusive of persons with certain differences or disabilities. But in reality, all of those things makes everybody's life better,
Hmm. Yeah.
you know. And I think it's critical that we remember that. I mean, how many times have we all either been in a process or conducting a process where, it takes 6 months to get a job? Um, to me, that's crazy. It shouldn't take more than 6 weeks, and that's with having scheduling issues.
Agree. And I think the piece you were talking about, even in terms of just being clear about what the timeline is, I can say for a role that I recently applied to, while I did receive a response, the response was, we're going to be reviewing things in the coming weeks and we'll
Yeah.
follow up if there's interest. So the coming weeks, I'm like, okay, it's been 3 weeks. So is this the coming weeks, or is there's already ambiguity
Mhm.
because I will say I was introduced to Ben through a search process, and I've told Ben, and I'm saying it publicly, he's a unicorn. This does not exist in the search process. The level of clarity, streamlined, I knew what was happening, when it was supposed to happen, if there's something pivoted being told. I had never experienced that. And I have been a social impact and mental health executive and strategist for 20 years. And Ben was the first person and firm that I met that was so clear and so direct. I'm like, you are a unicorn. And
Well,
it
I want to
shouldn't be
share
that.
something that's really valuable. Um, I had to turn Claire down for the job. She didn't get it. And the fact that we're having this conversation speaks to that. One of the things that I love about some of my characteristics is, I'm blunt. I'm to the point. I don't see the I don't see the value in small talk. That's a very ADHD, trait that I have. I don't see the value in it. So I'm not going to waste time. And I'm going to respect everybody that has the courage to apply for a job, um, not because they applied, but because they're people, they have
Hmm.
families. They're looking at this as a way to change their world and change other people's world. And that's what we have to remember when we're doing these processes is everybody thinks differently. How are we accommodating that? How are we making sure that anxiety and stress are limited for everybody involved? Um, you know, in a lot of nonprofits that I've worked in, when there's one person missing, everybody's got to fill in that gap. We're not privileged to have four people doing the same job, like you are at a lot of larger companies. That stress and pressure is exhausting. Then
Hmm.
having to interview is exhausting. You see, finding candidates that are emotionally invested in the work that we are doing. As somebody who sources those candidates, it's exhausting. I can't tell you how many people I find that are technically qualified, but really don't care what mission they're working for as long as they have a job. The way I hire, I respect that, but if you don't care about the mission of the organization, you can't drive the organization forward. Um, and these are all things that when you clearly state them, when you go through and set up your hiring processes, when you do an intake with whomever's leading it, you put those things in place. Like for me, that's recruitment 101. That's hiring 101. You don't leave anything to chance. Everybody knows their role from day one. Everyone knows when we're trying to make this happen. You give a little bit of room for, unforeseen things. Somebody can get sick. There can be a crisis. I've worked in mental health agencies where sometimes you can't control somebody, a client just having a bad day. You know, I started in direct care. I can't tell you how many times I was punched on a day when I thought it would be good. Like it just happens. In those cases, I'm not interviewing afterwards. I'm icing my shoulder or my mouth or whatever, because that's what happens. And we have to be aware of that. Um, you know, and as we're talking this through, and I appreciate there have been a few comments, but definitely feel free to share your experiences. Definitely feel free to ask questions because the goal of this is for everybody that's sitting in to take away what they need to take away so that they can successfully integrate this really into the fiber of the organization. Uh,
Hmm.
that's what all these things should not be thought processes. They should just be standard operating procedures that you do. The same as you check your email first thing in the morning, or you grab a cup of coffee, or in my case, have some eggs. This should be part of that. It shouldn't be something that is separate.
Yeah, agreed. If it's baked into the foundation, it doesn't shift. And I think often we put these as nice to haves and add-ons. We do the one and done trainings. We do the one and done, once a year we're required to do X, Y, Z, and it really does impact our ability to integrate and it impacts your culture. And so what we're talking about is shifting the culture of your organization. And I can definitely say, having led nonprofits and been in that space for a long time and government, it is, we often think we can't shift because we're just barely just turning the hamster wheel every day. Like we're just barely getting over it. We're just never getting off it. We just have to keep turning it. But I would say, it may be a little bit painful to shift, but it's also painful to remain the same. And we are harming not only your reputation, when Ben talked about the experience and how we are able to navigate through the fact that I did not get that role. it went to the other person, but we still have a connection. It's because the experience I went through with Ben a year ago,
Mm-hmm.
it's a year.
Year,
We have
happy
our year
anniversary.
anniversary. I just realized that the experience led to this connection where we've been able to partner and hey Ben, I want you to talk to this person. Hey Claire, I want you to talk to this person. I know you do keynotes. I know you do workshops. I know you know, this experience has made me shift even the way that I say I want to make sure that if I connect someone to a hiring firm, the questions that I have come up with now because I've met Ben lets me know whether or not this is a nonprofit that I would even recommend to my network to work with. So that is how significant this is. Because when we think about our mental health and well-being, again, I don't need you to self-disclose, but when we think about this hiring process and even what Ben is talking about, the non-apparent disabilities, mental health is the leading disability in the world. It has been for decades. That is according to the World Health Organization. That's not me. You know, we know that 25% of the population lives with a disability. We also know that up to 70% of employees say that their managers impact their mental health more than their spouses or their doctors or their therapist. If,
So,
go ahead.
oh, no, no, you go ahead, because we do have a question that I want to
Yes,
bring forward.
yes. So if we're spending most of our waking adult hours in this space, whether it's nonprofit, corporate, whatever it is, and we also know that 76% of US workers say they have a mental health condition, and 84% of them say that their jobs contribute to them. It is incumbent upon us as nonprofit leaders and people in social impact and executives across the space to shift the way that we start our culture before people even get to our doors.
Which is a perfect interlude to the question that was presented. And so, in relation to shifting the culture of the organization, how do you start and who do we start with? Um, I'll let you go first and then jump in if there's anything to add.
Yeah, I love this question. Thank you so much. And it's part of the work that I do through Dr. Claire Speaks.
Yes.
So I start with the leaders because at the end of the day, the middle of the day and the beginning of the day, the fish rots from the head or the fish smiles from the head. And so for me, it is I want to understand what are the barriers or what are the things that are impacting the organization. And I can't do that if I don't know what the burden the leaders are, what burdens you are carrying, those of you that are here. People often forget that you're human too. People often forget that you cry too, that you need to rest too, that you're overwhelmed too, because we have this toxic belief that leadership means that we have all the answers and we're going to figure it out and we're leading with strength. There is victory in vulnerability. And my work in helping leadership leaders align well-being, equity, and organizational culture is to reduce the harm, strengthen the trust, and to build the relationships where people and performance thrive. At the end of the day, every business is in the business of making money. A nonprofit cannot exist if it doesn't make money. You can't pay your staff, you can't pay your bill. Every business is to make money. It's just tax status. But part of that work is understanding what's happening. But I also want to be clear that leadership is not position and title. Everyone is a leader. And let me tell you how I know. How many of you are parents or have ever babysat anyone? A 2-year-old is a leader. Because if you've ever seen a 2-year-old in a supermarket or in Target or anywhere throwing a tantrum, they are leading people to do what they want because they're trying to reduce that noise. And if you've been like me and you saw the 2-year-old decide that they were not wearing their Pampers and take off their clothes and go streaking down the store, everybody's running after that baby. They're leading people. You can lead, depends on where you're leading. I didn't say good leader, I didn't say bad leader, I said lead. So leadership and working to make sure that the leaders are well and understanding what is happening within the culture of the organization is important. The second thing is to answer your question is we have to be honest. So often we are not honest about the culture of our organization. Your culture of your organization is told by not only your staff, your morale, your turnover rates, how long it takes to hire, what people are saying about you, how do you deal with feedback? How is the person who has the least agency in your organization, how are they respected? How is their voice managed? How are they brought into the conversation? Do we leave them out because this person is not whatever title or they don't have the right position title for you to listen to them? It starts with being honest and it starts with being willing. There's a saying that you learn something new every day. And I think I've shared this with Ben. My belief is that that sentiment is often incomplete. We learn something every day if we are willing. And often that means we have to be willing to sit in the discomfort and have that mirror held up, not as a you're doing something bad, but as how do I walk hand in hand and partner with you? And that's the work that I do is how do I partner with you because I want you to shine. And I know that you're stressed and I know that you're burdened. But the culture starts with what you tolerate. I can tell an organization's culture by the worst behavior that they tolerate. That's all I need to know.
Something that I would like to, at least for me, clarify, the word leadership to me, it doesn't necessitate people on payroll. When I
Yes.
think of organizational leadership, there are two groups that are absolutely critical, and they're critical for culture as a whole. One is your board of directors. It's a volunteer board.
Mm-hmm.
Your board of directors is the one who's responsible for your CEO, your executive director. They hire them. They're the ones that give them their responsibilities and the marching orders. It starts there. It has to start on the top.
Mm-hmm.
The second place where it's also really important is I think about volunteers in our organizations. If we have a good organization, people want to be part of it. People want to be volunteers. One of the things that I do when I hire, well, is there anybody internally that can be promoted?
Mm-hmm.
No. Okay. Are there any volunteers within your organization that we should look at? Because here's what I know about a volunteer. They're there because they want to be. They're not there to make money. They're there because they care. Um, so as we're looking at shifting culture, we got to think about the people who aren't paid to show up, but
Mm-hmm.
the people that really drive the organization. It's also critical to remember that the people that we're doing this for, you know, are we as an organization providing our structures the same as we are in our programs? And very often we're not,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and very often programmatically we're aware of who we're serving, but we don't think about it in a lot of other places, and for me that's really troublesome, and it makes me think about, why is it important for nonprofit leaders, any title, any position, anybody affiliated with the organization, why do they need to be aware of non-apparent disabilities? Why do they need to be why do they need to be aware of, inclusive hiring practices? Why do we need to be aware of, even when we're not talking about disabilities, but we're talking about social impact like code switching? We're talking about masking.
Mm-hmm.
Like these are things that are absolutely critical. And so, like
Yeah.
what does that neuro-inclusivity look like, when we are putting together a hiring process? And are we thinking about it
Mm-hmm.
first and foremost? Yeah.
I I don't think we think about it, and I think like so much of what you're saying is tying in the reality that every single one of us has something. We don't know what people are dealing with. You are not going to be able to notice things. But when you start with the foundation of equity, which is what the answer for me for this question is, everybody wins. Most nonprofits, I would dare, I don't know any nonprofit that is not mission driven, whether that is save the whales, save the, you know, Play-Doh, save people, whatever that is, there is a mission. And because there is a mission, that has to be rooted in some form of understanding that there's some inequity happening that means that we have to advocate and support this group. So when you are inclusive, when you have inclusive design in your hiring process, when you have inclusive design in your culture, when you have inclusive design in the way that your expectations, your policies, your procedures, it uplifts and upholds the mission that you say you stand on, your values, your goals, your brand. When you think about how do we do some of these things, you mentioned it probably 15 minutes ago, Ben, about having questions in advance. One, that is equity rooted because that would ensure that everyone is being asked the same questions. And so we're not throwing things in there that I get versus Ben doesn't get. And
Which is also a compliance issue.
I literally was going to say, and also this stops the lawyer from being upset with you. So you just took it out of my
Yes.
mouth. Like let's just, and I can say that, and I know I spoke to Ben about an incident I had experienced where 4 rounds of interviews, everyone said something different. When I got to the last interview, my spirit in my soul just said no. And part of that was because I felt as though I was being interrogated. The questions did not make sense. They were definitely questions that violate every rule that comes from you shouldn't ask personal questions. And I thought to myself, if I wasn't who I was, if I didn't look the way I looked, if it was whatever assumptions this person made about me, would I be being asked these questions? Because none of these questions had anything to do with my skill, my experience, my desire to work within the organization. They felt very personal. And so that already let me know about the culture, about who I may be working with and partnering with. But it also let me know that this was not a place that I could partner with because it wasn't based in equity. And they had wonderful equity statements on the website, but in practice, it wasn't there. When you focus on skills and over this person's a fit, personality wise as well, we're challenging you to go beyond bias. We often talk about unconscious bias. Yes, I know I'm a mental health practitioner. Yes, I love the brain. I absolutely adore the brain. I will talk to you for 3 hours about the brain. But at the end of the day, many of our unconscious biases are things that we do bring to our conscious. If you have processes that are aligned and equity rooted and you're clear about what the expectations are, it also helps to minimize or mitigate stigma. And that's on big things. Research lets us know, and you should know by now if you haven't figured it out, I am a nerd in heels. I absolutely love research. I'm going to bring it in because I'm an educator at heart. Research shows us that when people have to mask or code switch, which means they have to act one way in front of a group of people to be accepted and another way in front of a group of people to be accepted, and they have to constantly switch their identities, it causes mental distress and fractures in our identity. That harms mental health. It contributes to burnout. It contributes to turnover. It contributes to mistakes. It contributes to loss of profitability.
Well, I'm going to share one other thing about masking. You know, masking is typically used around neurodivergent trait and suppressing them. You know, it's really important that we have a dynamic team when we work. Nobody by law has to disclose any disabling conditions.
Right.
You know, do we want to create an environment where people feel safe to do that? Absolutely. But our behavior needs to be such that it doesn't even matter. We're taking that into consideration. And as somebody who has masked the better part of their entire life, people start to forget who they actually are. They don't know what's real and what's not real. And they don't know who they are. So when you want people to bring themselves into a workplace, and in nonprofits specifically, it is so critical that that lived experience comes in because that's how our clients can relate to us. Um, I'll give you a really quick example. There is a young adult that I work with who is in a day treatment program. After the first day, he let me know there was somebody who graduated from the university he attends. And his response was, I can just be me around this person because there are so many things that are similar. They're both musicians, they're both theater people, like they can express. And what we want to make sure is, you know, within neurodiversity or within differences, there is power behind the way different people think. The way that Weiser is set up, I'll be honest, I'm somebody, I got a lot of great ideas. At least I think I do. A lot of big ideas. My business partner is somebody that is very grounded in reality to the um, to the way that I think. So it balances. I come with grand ideas. She lets me know if something's feasible. She makes me think about how does this, impact in reality. And when we look at our teams, we want to have people that can bring themselves to work. We want to have we want to have people that are not scared to be authentic. And that's really critical. Hold on one second. We do have another comment. It's around masking. It says, I don't understand. Isn't it normal to appear a different way depending upon who you are interacting with? I am not the same person at work that I am at home. Is that what you're talking about? Would you like to hit that one or would you like me to start? You're on mute. Unmute, Claire.
I said you can start specifically and then I will fill in because I think
Yes,
this is a great question. Thank you so much.
it is. It's a brilliant question. You know, at work, we do some work things. For example, when I'm watching a basketball game with my friends, the words that come out of my mouth have absolutely zero place in a work environment. But when we're talking about masking, you're not even being authentic. You are literally trying to hide the pieces of you that are going to make people take a step back. You're going to hide the parts of you that you go, well, are they just going to think I'm a weirdo? Or are they going to be able to relate to this? And you replace them with what you think other people expect of you and expect how you're supposed to operate in that environment. And so when I'm in an environment and I'm masking, what I'm doing is I'm mirroring other people. I am not Benjamin in that moment. I am what Benjamin thinks Benjamin is supposed to be so that Benjamin can get through that situation without anybody noticing that I'm uncomfortable or that that environment doesn't work for me. And so I am compromising who I am to fit. And, it's one thing to act differently in front of different people, but it is another thing to suppress who you are so that you can be in a space, and
Yeah.
it's exhausting.
Yeah.
And that's where you lose who you are because you get to a point where you don't know if you're mirroring people or if that's who you are or who you should be. And it really, like, it messes with your head.
Yeah, it definitely does. And I will say that the word that I want to pull out here, Ben, is it's a survival tactic.
Yes.
That's literally what it is. And so, Erica, the question that you're asking is very good. You're right. We do switch. You may not speak the same way in front of your sister. I have a twin sister. You may not speak the same way in front of your sister that you speak in front of your mother or in front of your father or in front of your spouse. Like you're gonna switch. That has to do with comfortability. The conversations that Ben and I are inviting you into this conversation because Ben and I have had this conversation a lot. And so this is literally a couch conversation. We've had these conversations. The difference with masking, particularly with autism, And then I'll also address code switching because there's overlap. It is conscious and unconscious. It's literally a way to suppress, to try to appear neurotypical, and it's typically driven out of fear or the stigma and the experience of rejection, which causes a heightened sense of anxiety, distress, because you cannot keep that on for a very long time. It's literally a survival instinct. Code switching can also be that for, and typically that's more connected with social and cultural acceptance. You know, when I am somebody who identifies as an immigrant, I identify as someone who's part of the Black diaspora, I identify as a woman, I identify as someone with non-apparent disabilities. It is how do I have to switch tone or vocabulary or the way that I present to be able to be accepted in that environment because of the stigma that often comes with it. It is the woman who shows up to a meeting who has to make sure that everything is in order because the men are may in her experience, the men that she's encountered have discounted what she says, and so now she is putting on this suit of I'm the boss, because in order to be heard she might have to raise her voice, she might have to have a certain characteristic. That is code switching to it, to be, it's part of survival. But yes, it is normal, but we're talking about going beyond normal social experiences. It's literally hiding yourself to survive in an environment and in a space that is toxic, that is harmful, that is exclusionary. And it not only leads to exhaustion and burnout, it absolutely fractures your mental health and sense of self. That's where the difference comes in. And that I think is often replicated in our nonprofit sector, in the way that we hire, in the cultures that we have, in the way that we lead, in the way that our board structures and the power dynamics that happen. It often plays out in our society and is replicated in our workspaces.
So thank you. And in talking about power dynamics, um, one of the things that's important to remember is in an interview process, there are absolutely power dynamics. Most people that go into an interview process feel like they're on trial. They don't understand that there is equity in the room because it's actually just a business meeting
Mm-hmm.
with two professionals. And so when that's not understood, how does that power dynamic and possibly unclear evaluation criteria, which is also really common within the nonprofit interview process, you know, how does that impact the ability to be authentic? How does that apply to, you know, having just an equitable situation where, you know, Claire's experience, my experience is pretty much the same experience.
Yeah, I can tell you a quick story, two quick stories. I went through an interview process years ago, and my first interview, I was me with 15 board members and two people from the office. That is 17 people interviewing one person. They had sheets of papers of questions just peppering me with questions. My second interview was then 12 people. That was incredibly overwhelming. And as confident as I am, I can get up and speak in front of a crowd of 1,000 people. But being almost like at the Inquisition and just that level of scrutiny that also indicated to me that they were not clearly prepared for that interview because it was the board members who were doing that interview. It made it very overwhelming because one person would ask a question and another person would ask a question. That person would forget that this person asked a question. Then they would literally say, "Oh no, we're not supposed to answer this." It was so disorganized and chaotic. And it literally showed me the power dynamics because I also understood the power dynamics I was watching play out on the board and also the power dynamics of if you get this job, we're your boss and you're going to have to follow what we do, what we say. I will also say there was another job. This is before I met Ben. I swear my processes would have ended much differently had I met Ben because I would have pulled myself out of a lot of searches and saved myself a lot of heartache.
I'll let you know. 17 people are never going to interview one person in anything I touch.
I
It's
listen,
criminal.
I
It's
remember when I
criminal.
told you that and you were just like, "What?" And I'm like, "Nope, this really happened." And another thing, especially when we talk about board dynamics, and I know in terms of time, so we're going to switch to explaining how you do some of these things and why it's important. But I cannot let you know that there was a hiring process I went through not too long ago, and I was told by the search firm essentially that the one of the largest donors on the board was racist, but they didn't know they were racist. And equity strategists, DEI, the intersection of DEI, leadership, mental health, equity, social and racial justice, that is me. And I didn't know how to process that in real time. And they tried to couch it in, yeah, we're working on it, but this is one of our largest donors, and they've been on the board for 30 years. So essentially, they're looking to hire their first person of color to lead this organization, but they're letting me know as a prospective employee that their board is racist. But you have these statements. Yeah, we're still trying to navigate this, but they don't know that they're racist. That's where the power dynamics play out, particularly because of funding issues, grant pressures, all of these things where sometimes we make these decisions to keep harm in our space because of the money and we're willing to have the high turnover, the poor reputation, the secret of the harmful board members. The board members are people who are, harassing people, whatever those things are. That experience was incredibly distressing for me. It was another time where I pulled myself out of a hiring process.
You bring up something really valuable, Claire. When, we are looking at our boards, most of the time our boards are volunteer.
Yeah.
Every board that I have sat on has members of the community. Okay. These members of the community, they don't work in hiring. Most of the people that sit on a board do not work in hiring. And as a result, you know, our boards are not trained. Our boards don't understand things about, prioritizing inclusivity, accessible hiring systems, salary transparency, which in some states is the law. Um, you know, but because they don't understand these things, the environment that they create, even if they have the best intentions, can really be disruptive and really be disconcerting. I mean, as what happened with Claire. I mean, I'll tell you, one of the reasons I started my own company is I couldn't work for people that didn't know what I did for a living, telling me what to do and how to do it, especially when they didn't understand the way that my mind works.
Hmm.
And so we need to think about how these things impact. We need to think about how hiring failures create financial and reputational risks. Um, we need to think about the person that walks away from the hiring process without a job. How are they going to then refer us? Um, you know, and so those are the things that we want to target.
Hmm.
And, because, I do want to be conscious of timing, you know, I want to, put forward what I think is really critical. And that's,
Hmm.
how can we measure, psychological safety in hiring?
Yeah.
What can we do to make sure that we're not alienating people and that we're setting people up for success? Because again, the single most important person in a hiring process is the person that doesn't get the job. Because they're the ones that are either going to talk really well about the organization and the process or really bad. And in an age of social media where everything is instant and without repercussion, this is what this is something that absolutely needs to be focused on.
Yeah, it is.
So, yeah, so like in your experience, what are things that can be done so that there is this psychological safety?
So I say psychologically honoring because I don't believe we can create psychological safety for everyone. What's safe for me is not safe for you, but I certainly think we can be psychologically honoring to people and to the human experience. It starts with transparency and it starts with some clear strategies that are consistent, policies, approaches that are consistent. We have to have a standard. How do you communicate? Are you transparent? Communicate clear timelines. As I shared with you initially with Ben, I knew what the timeline was. This process is X amount of time, and when things shifted because of the client, that was also communicated in advance. What are the accommodation requests that people are making? What experience did your candidates have? We often do exit interviews. Let's do candidate interviews and surveys. How did they experience it? Have structured interviews. Train your board. Train your board. Train your board.
Yep.
And have expectations of your board. And if your board is not aligned to what you are expecting, then that there has to be some structures that say then they may not be able to be involved or certain people because it is now exposing you to legal risk. Your boards are DNOs. They're volunteers. Your company is going to get sued. They still work somewhere else. Their company's not getting sued for not doing inclusive hiring practices. Ask people for, what their accommodation requests are in advance and just have some general accommodation requests there that people don't have to ask for them. I know when I think of things like ASL, I know it's hard because it's costly and all of these things. But what would it look like for a world where somebody doesn't have to say, can I have an ASL interpreter, that it's just there? What would it look like for a candidate to not worry about what the questions are, but when they submit their application and they get selected, they are told, here are the questions, and they're not given a homework assignment that's unpaid to come up with a whole project and development plan that you're now going to take and use and they don't get hired. What does it look like to invite scoring rubrics into your competencies? These are all things that you can do that are not hard lifts, where you can absolutely start to build a foundation of equity, not only in terms of creating psychologically honoring cultures, but having trauma and healing informed and values aligned hiring practices and policies. I would
Something,
go ahead.
sorry, no, no, finish.
I was going to say, I would also say it's really important to shift the way that we think of interviews. Do you have to have an interview where you're reading and asking questions? Can it be conversational? If someone can it be virtual? Can it be in person? Switch the format of the way that people can respond. Some people may have to take time to process information. We all do. Sometimes people assume that we process like this. Other times people are very thoughtful. Think of who we assume to be the introvert versus the extrovert. People, it's really just a matter of how you receive information and how you show up. You may be thoughtful. Because somebody is not answering the questions right away doesn't mean that they're not interested. They may be thoughtful. So let's shift the way that we even expect responses and give choice in the way that they can respond to us. And train your staff, your boards. I'm going to keep going back to training because I'm very big on risk management. You're exposing your organization to risk reputationally, financially, and that it's going to impact the legacy of your brand if you are not creating practices that are inclusive, because we know that inclusivity strengthens performance, innovation, profitability, and culture.
Something to add to that, and for me, these are real low-hanging fruit. You know, ask somebody if they're comfortable shaking hands. Asks, if somebody's not making eye contact, don't think they're being rude. It could be cultural that it's not acceptable.
My culture.
Yep. It could be, you know what? I'm autistic. Making eye contact makes me really uncomfortable sometimes. You know, a lot of organizations like these video interviews where it's just predetermined questions and the candidate has to answer onto a videotape. I'm gonna let you know those suck. They're awful.
They do.
They're absolutely awful. If I can't ask a clarifying question, if I can't give my answer in the 90 seconds that I have, if I'm uncomfortable being videotaped for whatever reason. They're awful. When we interview, we have to think about it in terms of equity. If we're asking questions, we have to be willing to receive them.
Yes.
If, if a candidate is uncomfortable asking for an accommodation, that means we're set up wrong. And I go back to the littlest thing of a handshake. You know, if I'm not comfortable shaking your hand, you know, any human touch should be clarified. Are you cool with a handshake? Can I shake your hand? Yes or no? It's that simple.
Mhm.
And it shows that we are respecting the people that we're interfacing with. You know, as we are just about at time, I want to thank everybody who attended. I appreciate it. This is a topic that, like I say, for me, this is what I live. It's what I've lived as a candidate. It's what I've lived as a professional. It's, you know, I've struggled in interview processes because I don't understand, you know, the social context of certain things. Um, so I want to thank everybody. I want to let you also know that Claire and I will be following up. You will have our contact information. You will also be able to have some of the questions and talking points that we put together. I want to thank the people that contributed, you know, and if this is something you want to talk more about, ask either one of us, ask both of us. We just want to see we want to see your organizations, doing the best they can and, including somebody who might ordinarily not get an opportunity to be included for reasons that are beyond their control.
Yeah, this is a great topic, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank
My
you.
my one anecdote I'll add is I'm a Gen Z kid and I graduated during COVID and finding a job with I guess my few years that I had at the very beginning, even though that I was qualified, the few jobs I got out of college, I had to be overly qualified for the position. And once I did get it, I got very bored and burnt out very quickly because it was way below what I was qualified for. But at the same time, in order to get in the door, somehow I had to be overqualified. So it's the interview processes are very complicated, and I really appreciate you guys going through that and bringing some light to some of those darker and not thought of corners of
Thank you.
interviewing and hiring. So. Yeah, as Benjamin said, you guys will have access to them. You guys will have your HRCI and SHRM credits sent to your email if you've opted in for those, as well as the recording of this session will be sent to your email. And if you guys have any further questions you think of now, next 48 hours, 72 hours, or whatever, feel free to email them over to us and we'll make sure that they are sent to the proper channel, whether it's Benjamin, whether it's Dr. Claire, whether it's us internally. And we are happy to answer those questions. They are very important. And at the end of the day, our nonprofit partners and trust members are absolutely what we live to serve and hope to just make more successful. So, anything else?
Just
Thank you so much for
thank
the
you.
All
opportunity.
right.
Yep.
Thank you so much, everybody. Hope you have a great day, and we'll give you 2 minutes back, it looks like. Have a good one.
Awesome.
Have a blessed one.
Bye bye.
Take care.